Hello, everybody. Adam Parks here with another episode of Receivables Roundtable. Today, I am here with industry legend Joann Needleman, who is a member and partner with Clark Hill. How are you doing today, Joann?
You're too kind, and I'm doing well. It's so nice to see you and enjoying your podcast today.
Absolutely. Well, I'm really glad that we had an opportunity to kind of chat today. I know that most of the people that are watching this are already familiar with who you are, but for anybody who's not familiar with your background, could you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and how you got to the seat that you're in today?
Happy to. It was not an overnight sensation, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
I've been a lawyer for a long time, and I've been in the industry for a long time. Started out in the mid 90s, and I was a collection lawyer, and I did a lot in the commercial collection space and what we like to call at that time was the retail collection space, but always on the legal side. Represented a lot of banks and institutions who needed representation with respect to debts that needed to be collected. It was also around the time where the debt buying industry was starting to really expand. And so I did represent a lot of debt buyers doing collection litigation for them. I got involved in associations early. I thought that getting involved in associations, certainly from an educational standpoint, was super important, but also from a networking and business development was also important. I was a member of, if you remember, the Commercial Law League. I think it's still around.
I do. Yeah.
And then I got involved at that time, was called NARCA, which was a bizarre name, and it was not the drug police, but at the time it was called the National Association of Retail Collection Attorneys, as I guess opposed to commercial collection attorneys. And it was really there where most of my career began and expanded. At that time, I met my former partner, Don Maurice, there in 2003. And from those meetings, we had a practice together for 13 long years, in pretty successful years. And then I decided to run for the board of then NARCA and sat on the board for many, many years. Was on its executive committee. I was treasurer. I don't think I was ever treasurer. Nobody would mind me with their money, but I was secretary and then president-elect, and became president of NARCA in 2013 to 2015. And I will say I was the first woman president, and NARCA needs to have another woman president soon. It's been too long in between leadership. But, being involved in associations has helped me not only with business development, but getting involved in industry issues. And at the time in the early 2000s, the early 2010s, I should say, the CFPB came along. And having sat in leadership of then NARCA allowed me to get involved with the CFPB. And ultimately, I was appointed to the Consumer Advisory Board back in 2015. And I don't think that would have happened but for my leadership at NARCA. One of the things I did when I was president was to kind of rebrand the association, which many associations do all the time.
Sure.
And we changed it from NARCA to the National Creditors Bar Association, which we felt was a more descriptive name for what we were, and that was attorneys. So it was, really a wonderful experience. And from that and working with the CFPB, I was able to then come over to Clark Hill in 2015. And I've been here now for 7 years, and that went by super quickly. I look at that and I'm like, I thought I just moved in like last week. It was really quick.
So tell us a little bit of what you do over at Clark Hill.
So, Clark Hill, when I came over, was about 300 lawyers, and I'd never been involved in big law before. And when I came over, people said, "You're crazy. You had a wonderful small practice with a great partner, and why would you come over to a big firm? You're going to lose your freedom, and it's going to be a disaster." And I have to say that it far from it. It was a very seamless transition. Now, again, it was a much smaller firm than it is today. But I think part of it, and I say to people who are young lawyers who are just either, starting in a big firm or thinking about transitioning, and there's a lot of that lately, It's really hard to be a young lawyer wherever you are. I don't care what the size of the firm. They just don't teach you lawyering skills and career skills when you're in law school. They teach you a lot of things, but that is just not part of the curriculum. So coming to Clark Hill, I was an adult already. I had clients already. I had been practicing for quite some time before I came over. So having a lot of support and infrastructure really for me was great, because I really knew how to leverage it. And I do to this day leverage it really well. But I came over because Clark Hill has had and still does a very significant banking transactional group. It's one of the largest groups in the law firm and one of the most successful. But they saw 7 years ago that these same bank clients, where they were doing commercial transactions from some of the largest institutions in the country, were getting very concerned about the regulatory scrutiny on the consumer side. And they're just at that time, as I said, in the early 2010s, there wasn't many of us who did this, who really focused on consumer finance and what that regulation meant. And so that was the reason that I came over. And it's been a great 7 years, and it has been certainly an opportunity, something that the firm was missing and something that I could provide. And it has really transitioned for our current clients and new clients to have that bench expertise. So it's been extraordinarily positive, and I've enjoyed being at Big Law very, very much. I'm not going to say it's not easy. It's extremely hard, but I have enjoyed it, and I've enjoyed working with many of my colleagues.
That's fantastic. And what a storied career. And I've been in the industry and been able to kind of watch a lot of that from the sideline, because I was going to NARCA shows. I think my first NARCA show was in 2006, and I've been to quite a few ever since. And I've also participated in the rebranding of an association, as you went from national creditors or from the National Association of Retail Collection Attorneys. And I feel like NARCA is still kind of stuck in my mind.
It is. It wasn't easy. Others have been better in transitioning. I will say that the RMAI did a wonderful job, and we don't think of RMAI as DBA anymore, right? But for those of us at NARCA, we still think of it as NARCA. It's hard to I don't know why that didn't take as well, but I thought that I did not come up with the name. There were some others that did. And there was a group of gentlemen that came up with it. And I thought it was, wow, that was brilliant. I was like, that's great. But it didn't, rebranding is difficult. So
you know what it is for me? Yeah. It's, I actually like the new name better, right? National Creditors Bar Association, I like, but NARCA rolls off the tongue like a word, and NCBA requires the statement of each letter. And so I think that's, that's probably a little piece of it. My background being marketing obviously helped me a little bit in kind of that role, but it brings up an incredibly good point. And I'm curious to get your take on this as an association leader and someone who's been active for so long. For me, as I've kind of worked through associations and become active and involved in multiple associations, and I've sat on other boards before RMAI, but I've always found associations to be like driving a steamship, right? Or driving a cruise ship. Whereas, our private businesses operate with one hand as much as possible. But like our private organizations operate more like a speedboat, right? We can turn left real fast. We can turn right real fast. But when you want to make a turn in an association setting, you're not just, it's not just an independent solo, hey, I'm going to make this decision. It's, all right, everybody, we're going to turn left. Is everybody ready to turn left? Okay, here we go. Turning left, right? It's almost like that movie Spaceballs, and that always made me laugh.
Yes.
Right? Preparing to fast forwarding, sir. And to me, that's kind of the difference, right? Between operating in a private business environment and operating in an association environment. Did you kind of find the same thing as you went through your path?
Yeah, I'll say that's the downside to associations, is that they're nonprofits, they're run by boards, they're not nimble. And I don't care whether you're the ABA, your NCBA, RMAI, if you've got a board and you have a board that represents membership, you're not going to get things done quickly. And I think that has been a handicap for our industry, because think about how much our industry has changed in the last 10 years. Absolutely. How much it's changed in the last 2 years. lightning speed.
Yeah.
And so it has been really difficult on several levels. One is it's hard for some associations, some do it better than others with respect to governance.
Mhm.
And people think, governance in a private company is really simple. It's my company, I'm going to do whatever I want. I mean, it's hard in a law firm too, but
Sure.
you have executive committees, but you know what? We have a CEO, and if he wants to get stuff done, he's going to get stuff done, and the executive committee is going to come along. But it's really, there's always been a push and pull between association boards and their leadership or their directors.
Mhm.
And part of that comes, everybody, certainly what I find in associations, that people that run for boards do it for a really good reason. They're leaders. They want to get their voice heard. They don't feel that they have that opportunity just being a member. And so you have a lot of, dare I say egos, but you have a lot of people that at the end of the day have all the best intentions in the world. They want to see change. They've come on the board for a reason. But board structure and association structure doesn't allow for that, to your point. It's like, you got to get everybody on board to make a left turn. And that's been challenging. I mean, certainly through COVID, certainly coming out of COVID, certainly when the CFPB came along. I mean, there was, I don't know if you were in the room many, many years ago, but Inside Arm back in 2010, 2011, I can't remember what it was, when the CFPB came out and did their larger market participant rule. God bless her, Stephanie Eidelman said, "Oh, we're going to get everybody in a room and we're going to figure out, how we're going to do this now that there's large market participants, and how we're going to engage with the CFPB." And that was a disaster, not on her part, just that she did not understand. And I don't think anybody really appreciated the fact that you had several different organizations. They were all run differently, and you weren't going to get everybody in a room on one day and get them all to agree, because even in their own associations, they couldn't agree on anything. So it is a struggle. But I think that despite that, I think all associations, especially in our industry, figure out what they need to do. There may be bumps in the road, but they do, at the end of the day, get from point A to point B.
Agreed. And one of the things that I ponder occasionally, right, as I've kind of moved up through
I think you
leadership.
ponder more than occasionally, but
Well, something that comes to my mind is really, is it maybe also there's definitely hindrances, and it can be frustrating when you can't move as nimbly in an association setting as you can in a private business. But it might also be a good thing on some regard, because we can't be as reactionary as an industry to an immediate change. And so I think on some level, it requires additional forethought, additional negotiations, and discussion, and maybe it gets more attention before that decision is made. Because something happens in my private business, I look at it and I can react with my gut and say, this is what we're going to do, this is our plan of action, everybody, let's onward, let's go, let's do this. And then with an association, you really have to take into account all of these different perspectives and points of view, right? Different size organizations, you got the big shops, you got the little shops, you've got everybody in between. And then you've got all the vendors and everybody else that plays into the ecosystem that lives within each one of the associations. And then you have the interworkings of the inter-association relationships as well, because, especially within our space, you have a group that's focused on lawyers, one that's focused on collectors, and one that have been focused on debt buyers. And I think that all continues to evolve and change over time. But I think it's probably a good thing that we can't just trip over things, right? That we do have to take a moment to ponder and to think before we can take the next step forward on any given item. Because if we were reacting and responding to everything that came from the CFPB this year, we would be very busy people.
We would have, our necks would hurt, because we would just constantly be well, but I think you make a really wonderful point, and that is that unlike our government,
Mhm.
finding consensus in the middle is crucially important for associations. And while it may take longer, again, to your point, it is important, because you've got to get buy-in. You represent a group of people. And sometimes radical ideas are only about people on the fringe.
Mhm.
And they're going to be in the minority compared to the consensus that you're going to have in the middle. And so I think all the associations have done a good job in carefully crafting their messages and getting as many people on board with what they intend to do, rather than, to your point, than being reactionary. But sometimes, I mean, I recall when Hunstein came out, was it, oh my God, it's been like 2 years. That was a radical sea change. But
Sure.
boy, the associations did such a wonderful job in coalescing together, having meeting groups, and putting a unified voice. And there are going to be these instances where there has to be a reactionary group hug in order to get, through these
Absolutely.
issues. And I think that was it's, and maybe you've seen this or not, but I've certainly seen this in the last 10 years. It's been hard to get all the associations on the same page sometimes. It makes sense for all of us, but sometimes it's difficult because everybody has their own little focus that they need. But when an event happens like a Hunstein, where the impact is across the board, it was really great, in my opinion, to see everybody coalesce, join together, put forth unified messages. And I think that I hope in the long run it helps. It certainly did a lot for everybody involved.
Well, I think as we saw at the beginning of COVID, we saw the group start to come together
Yep.
and try and find, where is the common ground that we can all be working together. And maybe some things, are not always as smooth as they potentially could be. But I feel like there's so much crossover between organizations too,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, so
Yep.
in my role at Plaza Services, I'm a member of any and every association I can be,
Right.
right? Like, we're
Right.
not a member of NCBA, but we're not lawyers.
Right.
So like, but we're actively involved. Like, I'll be there in October out in Tampa,
Good.
and
Good.
I've been actively engaged in that community for a long time. Especially for me, way back in the day, a lot of the attorneys like to purchase debt. So when I was
Right.
able to sell portfolios on a state by state level, like, I've developed a lot of really great relationships over at
Mm-hmm.
NCBA. And so it's interesting to see how the world continues to evolve. And I think what I've noticed is, if you look across the associations right now, you're looking at an even younger generation of leadership. NCBA and ACA currently have second generation individuals in leadership roles, right?
Yep.
I'm the youngest president in the history of RMAI or DBA. So I think you're starting to see a little bit of a paradigm shift and trying an adaptation to the technologies and a comfort level with some of the changes that are coming down the pipe. And it does take some time, right? Like, it took us all time to get used to Reg F and to prepare for what Reg F was going to mean to
Mm-hmm.
the industry, modifying the technology and all that. And now we're starting to move into this, what I'd like to call the digital age of debt collection, right? Our ability
Yep.
to start to leverage more of these digital channels to get into this opti channel versus this omni channel setting, and being able to jump back and forth and provide consumers with communications on a variety of different platforms and levels. I'm honestly quite proud to be part of the discussion as these things are going on. And now I think it's become, our responsibility to start developing that next generation of leadership and continuing to make sure that each one of the associations is getting, leadership that understands the different perspectives that make up each one of the individual organizations, and being able to represent these larger groups. Because it's not always, it's not, as you're aware, it's not like a glamorous job to go be, on the
No,
board. It's a
no,
lot of work.
a lot of work. Yep.
And you have to kind of groom that next generation of leadership and continue to pass on the oral traditions that are necessary for this industry to continue to thrive. For me, I got grabbed at my first major bank conference. I had Mike Colby and Tom Hicks grab me, take me to the side, teach me all about the RTC and how the original
Right.
auctions went down.
Yeah.
And they literally just described the industry in a 101 like history setting. And I carry that forward every day, right? So I have always made it a point at every conference that I go to find somebody who's a first time attendee, especially if it's a conference I've been attending for over a decade. I try and find a first time attendee and share my knowledge with them, share some introductions with them. And, look, not everybody's going to work out and become the next leader of an association, but I think it's our responsibility to send the elevator back down once we've reached the top.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that also a lot of it has to do with um, ensuring that the companies and law firms that are in this industry are grooming
Mm.
and recruiting
Mhm.
And I know that's hard, recruiting young lawyers to come into the industry. I mean, my background, I didn't go into all of it, but when I got out of law school, I was in the DA's office for a while.
Okay.
And, that's where I really got my feet wet on how to be a litigator. But, this industry really can groom some good litigators, because guess what? You're in court right away. I mean, now granted you have a list, but I mean, when I did preliminary hearings, they start you out municipal in Philadelphia. And so I
Mhm.
had 70 cases every day, which meant I had to call cops and I had to get witnesses. So I learned how to manage a docket. And most collection law firms, that's what you're doing. You're doing docket management. And you know what? For a young lawyer, it's a wonderful experience. I mean, if you come to a big firm as a young lawyer, you're never, and you want to be a litigator, you're never going to see the inside of a courtroom for years.
Mhm.
You're going to be stuck doing research. So if you really want to get some hands-on experience, and it's so important to have relationships with courthouses and judges and law clerks, that's part of your business development. It's part of how you build your reputation. Sometimes you're not going to, you'll build a reputation within your large firm,
Mhm.
but you're not going to build a reputation within your community where you're practicing unless you're really in court. And I think that some of the firms that NCBA member firms could really do a lot in trying to recruit and develop those young attorneys, because to your point, they are going to be the future leaders of the industry.
Well, I think it's true across the industries, right, when it comes to the debt buyers and teaching people how that side of the world functions, and even the collection agencies, and being able to learn operations and the mix of skill sets that it has become. It used to be you could be a great operator in the industry by being really good on the phone. And now you
Right.
need to know tech, finance, right? You need to have this really
Organizational
broad skill set.
dynamics. You need to know organization. You have to,
Yeah.
you're running something. I mean, it was
Yeah.
not, and boy, did everybody learn that during COVID when they had to go move everybody out of their offices and set up within, 48 hours. So there are great skills that can be taught in this industry. And we need, I think, as an industry as a whole, need to be going into law schools and
Mhm.
colleges and whatever, and seeing those next crop of young people to come in this industry, because unfortunately, as you know, Adam, the industry is contracting, and it really shouldn't be. I don't, it shouldn't be. Economies of scale are going to dictate that, but
Sure.
there is, I think, a lot of opportunities in this industry, and good opportunities for those who are interested.
Well, I think the economies of scale dictate it, but I think there's also opportunities within economies of scope, right? Like, same
Mm-hmm.
reason McDonald's started selling breakfast. They already had a restaurant, they already had the staff, and I think you've seen a lot of these people start to move from
Right.
that collections operation and expand
Mhm.
into BPO services and other things. Or
Right.
you see debt buyers starting to buy performing notes. You start seeing these law firms that are merging up or spreading their wings into more states and more opportunities. So I think it'll be interesting to see how the industry continues to evolve over the next couple of years. But I'm just excited to be part of the ride, right? I'm excited to be
Yeah,
part of an industry
absolutely.
that's full of such good people, and honestly, that's what's kept me in the industry so long. I mean, I'm involved in a lot of other businesses, but this has always been my primary focus. And I feel like it always will be because of the people that are associated with this
I
industry.
could, I mean, some of my dearest friends are in this industry. I always, pre-COVID, it was, coming to NCBA conferences or other conferences were, yeah, it was work and yeah, it was tiring, but it was a time to see my friends. And we had some good times. Well, that's for another podcast, but we'll talk.
Well, we will follow up on that one. Hopefully, you'll come and join me again. I really
Yeah.
appreciate you coming
Yeah.
on
No, this
today,
was
Joanne.
wonderful. This was wonderful. Thank
This
you.
was a lot of fun. I'm glad we got a chance to connect at a recent conference so that we could come
Yes.
together and create some
Wonderful.
content together.
And you
Um,
reminded me that I blew you off a couple years. So if I don't recall that, but if I did, my sincerest apologies. It sounds like something I would do, but thanks for calling me out on that. I need to get
Fair
level set
enough.
once in a while.
Hey, look,
So
I try to keep it A-list here as much as I can, and I think it's important that everybody in the industry have an open opportunity to learn from people like yourself that have had such a great experience in the industry and have been through so many different trials and tribulations as an industry and as an industry leader. And I think it's important that everybody learn from it. For those of you that are watching, if you have additional questions that you'd like to ask Joanne and I, you can leave those in the comments below, both here on YouTube and LinkedIn. We'd be happy to respond to those. If you have additional topics that you'd like to see us cover, you can leave those in the comments as well. I'm sure Joanne and I would be happy to continue creating great content for a great industry. But until next time, Joann, I really appreciate you coming on today and looking forward to see you again at an upcoming conference.
Absolutely. Thanks, Adam. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.